Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the channel. UFC London just ended and what an amazing card. I mean, this was a great fight night card on paper, but you never know how it's going to turn out. And this turned out to be an amazing fight card. And I'm going to give you all my post-fight analysis. I'm mainly going to talk about the main event, but there were so many notable fights and notable finishes on this card, more importantly, that I feel like I have to give some sort of breakdown and analysis. So I'm going to go over a lot of the card for this post-fight video. So first off, starting off with the main event, you had Alexander Volkov versus Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall getting the first round submission via straight armbar. And going into this fight, I was really 50-50 on this fight. I eventually picked Alexander Volkov by decision to win this fight. And what led me to make that pick was experience. This was Tom Aspinall's toughest test to date in his UFC career, in his MMA career, and I just thought the experience of Volkov, considered the fact that Aspinall has looked great, but not against the best competition, it just led me to pick Volkov, but I could not have been more wrong. Everything that most people who were picking Aspinall going into this fight said was correct. Aspinall looked super athletic in this fight. His hand speed looked amazing. His takedowns looked great. And obviously his jiu-jitsu looked great. This fight just started off and, you can kind of get a feel for a fight, in the first 30 seconds, depending on what happens, and you can kind of get a vibe. And when this started off, I really was like, oh, I should have picked Aspinall in this fight. The hand speed looked good. He was landing on Volkov. Eventually, perfectly timed takedown, takes him down, ground and pounds him with brutal elbows. Eventually, though, Volkov did show some experience. He was able to get back to his feet, even after absorbing that damage. But when he got up, I mean, he looked like he was hurt. He looked very slow. He looked like he was in the fourth round of a crazy war. And Aspinall starts putting it on him again, throws a good amount of leg kicks in this fight, which is really good to limit the movement of Volkov. After Volkov got ground and pounded, when he stood back up, there was almost no footwork from him. I don't know if he was hurt or it was, because of the leg kicks. He was checking some of them. But Aspinall eventually, as, Volkov starts to throw some body kicks, some teepee kicks to the body, which I thought would pay dividends as the fight went later, considering Tom Aspinall, I don't think, has ever been out of a second round, let alone 5 rounds. Tom Aspinall ducks out of the way of a punch, shoots on a perfectly timed double leg, and he immediately starts setting up that straight armbar, gets the straight armbar, gets the tap from Volkov. I don't know how many people picked Tom Aspinall by first round submission, but the ceiling for Tom Aspinall now, and he's proven that he belongs with the elite of the elite at heavyweight. I don't know how many people were picking him by submission. Now, maybe there was a lot. Maybe I missed it. But what a performance. Forget about the submission. Just everything. There was nothing not to like from Tom Aspinall. The hand speed looked good. The power looked good, but we know the power is good. Most of the heavyweights have solid power. The takedowns looked good. The fight IQ looked good. He was landing on the feet, but he made a conscious decision to say, you know what? I can exploit him on the ground. And I will exploit him on the ground. And even after the first takedown and he landed some good elbows, he started to look to set up a Kimura. So he must have had it in his mind, I'm going to try to submit Alexander Volkov going into this fight, looking for the early Kimura. Doesn't get it. Volkov gets up, starts landing some strikes of his own. I think it was after he got up, but it might have been before he got up. No, it was after he got up for sure, now I remember. It looked like Aspinall got clipped and fell, but it turns out I think it was a slip. After talking to some more people, I realized that I don't think he actually got hit. I just think he slipped. He didn't look. He definitely was not hurt at all. But in this fight, he gets back up, immediately recomposes himself, takes him back down, and gets the submission. And what a phenomenal performance! And then afterwards, he calls out Tai Tuivasa. And I know Tai Tuivasa, I think, is currently ranked like number 3 in the world. I heavily favor Tom Aspinall to beat Tai Tuivasa. I think Aspinall can outgrapple him. I think Aspinall can submit him. I think Aspinall can knock him out. I think Aspinall has the faster hands. I think Aspinall, I know they both have KO power, obviously. Tai Tuivasa has been knocking everyone dead lately. But I like where Tom Aspinall matches up everywhere with Tai Tuivasa. And I know I know Tom Aspinall has said he kind of wants to take it slow. And, or at least before this fight, he was saying, I kind of want to take it slow and make my way slowly up the rank. Well, there's none of that anymore. He just beat, whatever. I forgot what Volkov was ranked, number 5, number 6, something like that. A number 5, number 6 ranked heavyweight and beat him with ease. He made Volkov look like he did not even belong in there. And even though it was a short fight, the fight only lasted 3 minutes and 45 seconds into the first round. And even though it only lasted a short amount of time, again, there was nothing not to like. The striking of Aspinall looked good. The takedowns of Aspinall looked good. The timing of Aspinall looked good. The ground and pound of Aspinall looked good. The jiu-jitsu looked good. The submissions looked good. Everything looks good for Tom Aspinall. And I can see him, we always talk about it. There's these massive heavyweights like Francis Ngannou in the past, like Brock Lesnar, Alistair Overeem back when he was Ubereem. And there's these huge heavyweights, but we always talk about it. We need these new breed of heavyweights that are just fast, a little bit lighter. Maybe they're not cutting weight to get down to 265. And I think Aspinall can be that guy. I like how he matches up with a lot of these guys. I like how he matches up against a guy like Derek Lewis. I think he beats the brakes off of Derek Lewis if he can avoid that nuclear shot. I like how he matches up with Stipe Miocic. I think he can beat Stipe Miocic. I think he's much faster than Stipe. I think he's very well-rounded. The only question mark coming out of this fight for me, now that Aspinall has beat a legitimate opponent at heavyweight, the only question mark is his cardio. And only time will tell as he gets into a fight that has to go into the later rounds. But that's not as massive of an issue as it is in some other divisions, because a lot of people at heavyweight don't have the best cardio anyway. So even if Aspinall does tend to fade later in the fight, it's not like there's a lot of guys who are going to put crazy volume on him and just destroy him as he gasses out in the later rounds. I just don't really see that. You look at the division, there's really nobody. I don't think Tuivasa has 4 or 5 round cardio. Obviously, he probably can survive through 5 rounds, but I don't see him being a guy, like Tony Ferguson just drowns dudes. You may beat him early, but as the fight goes on, gets in that 3rd, 4th, 5th round, he will drown you with just volume strikes. Colby Covington, a similar guy, where you might be able to, be very competitive early on, but as you start to fade, he takes advantage with the stamina. And there's not a lot of guys that can do that at heavyweight. And Ngannou's not the guy to do that. Stipe, maybe. Stipe does have really good cardio. He's one of those slimmer heavyweights as well. But there's just not a lot of guys like that. There's very few. The only one I can think of off the top of my head is Stipe Miocic. So even if that is a slight issue for Aspinall, it's not going to be the biggest deal in a division where most fights end in knockouts. And, he looks so good in this fight. Even another thing I didn't mention, the variety of attacks. Not only was he landing with the hands, he was throwing nasty leg kicks as well, and very powerful leg kicks. So I am very high on Tom Aspinall. I was slightly high on him before this fight, but again, I always lean towards experience. And when I see the level of competition isn't that great, it's hard for me to be crazy high on a guy just because I'm like, okay, well, he looked great, but look at the level of competition. But I can't wait to see where Tom Aspinall goes after this. I would love to see him against Tai Tuivasa. I think he wins that fight. And if he goes out there and let's say he sleeps Tai Tuivasa, I mean, that could potentially earn him a title shot. Tai Tuivasa's on a massive, streak himself, looking really good. People are talking about him in title shot considerations. So what's to say Tom Aspinall can't potentially go out there, fight Tai Tuivasa, and then if maybe he beats him, he finishes him in the first, second round. I mean, people are going to be saying it's time for Tom Aspinall to fight for a title. And I even like the way he matches up with Ngannou. Now, I think it's a little bit premature to start talking about that. But, I know Ngannou in his last fight was injured, and I know Ngannou has that nuclear power. But that could be a fight we could be looking at in the future. And Ngannou's only getting older. Tom Aspinall is still pretty young, in his 20s. I really like that heavyweight division for Tom Aspinall. Okay, let's move on from the main event. Let's move to the co-main event. Arnold Allen versus Dan Hooker. I took Arnold Allen in this fight. Arnold Allen with a brutal TKO, standing TKO of Dan Hooker. And there was nothing not to like about Arnold Allen in this fight. He's shown, he hurt Dan Hooker early. And he began to swarm Dan Hooker. And it was getting kind of close to a stoppage. He gets clipped. I thought he might have slipped in this too, but I went back and watched the replay a couple times. Dan Hooker clipped him with a left hand. And I don't know if it was a drop, but it made Arnold Allen kind of squat down. His knees went out, and he recovered and then immediately rocked Dan Hooker again, swarmed him a little bit more. And he made a conscious decision that, you know what, I'm not going to finish him here. I'm going to relax. I don't want to blow myself out. He reset himself. And then eventually, I think he landed a straight right. This was like minutes later, he landed a straight right and then a head kick. and rocked Dan Hooker again after Dan Hooker had survived. Swarmed him again. Dan Hooker just shelled up against the fence, and Arnold Allen threw repeated standing elbows. Dan Hooker wasn't absorbing a lot of damage at this point in time with the standing elbows, but he wasn't defending himself. If you're letting, 10, 15 shots come in, even if you're blocking them, if you're not moving, the ref's going to stop it. The ref calls off the fight. Phenomenal performance by Arnold Allen. I thought this was going to be a close fight. I had Arnold Allen by decision, but Arnold Allen came out there and made Dan Hooker look like he did not belong. And I know I said that about the main event, but he really did. Dan Hooker, he looked great on the scale. He looked ripped coming in this fight. He looked much bigger than Arnold Allen, but I think Arnold Allen is vastly underrated in the featherweight division. And, Dan Hooker, I feel really bad for him. He's now, I think he's won 1 out of his last 5. Where does he go? And it's only over Nasrat Haqparast. I know he stepped in on short notice against Islam Makhachev, but, you make the weight class change because you're not having success at lightweight, and now you get brutally TKO'd at featherweight. Where does he go from here? I don't know. Some people are saying Dan Hooker should retire. I'm not necessarily one of those people that thinks Dan Hooker should retire, but it's hard. It's really hard to kind of say, where does Dan Hooker go from here? I don't see him really. I don't know what he does. Does he stay at featherweight? Is he going to blame it on the weight cut? I don't know. Is he going to blame it on the weight cut? I'm glad at least that he didn't get flatlined in this fight, because if he would have got flatlined, I think everyone would have blamed it on the weight cut. He still looked durable, but he just took a lot of damage, And you look over the course of his career, the Edson Barboza fight from a while ago took a lot of damage. You look at the Dustin Poirier fight. What a war that was. Took a lot of damage in that fight as well. Dan Hooker's in a funky spot. He's not winning at featherweight against Arnold Allen. And I know a lot of people may not know. I know the hardcores know who Arnold Allen is, but maybe a lot of people aren't super familiar with Arnold Allen. He's a legit featherweight fighter, and this was a great win for him over the biggest name of his career. So, I still think it's not like, it's one of these things where Dan Hooker's losing, but look at the level of competition he's losing to. He lost to Islam Makhachev, who's borderline fighting for a title. He lost to Arnold Allen, who's close to being in a number 1 contender fight, maybe 2 fights away from being in a number 1 contender fight, maybe even 3 fights away, I guess, maybe from a title, maybe 2 fights away from a title shot. So it's not the worst loss. But at the end of the day, when you're trying to have a career resurgence like Dan Hooker is, it's just really not a great spot to be in. Getting finished now, moving down from lightweight to featherweight where you used to be, and getting finished like this. My guess is he'll probably stay at featherweight. I think he has a better chance to kind of have that career resurgence there. But I think a lot of us knew a long time ago that Dan Hooker was really never going to be a title contender in any division. But it's crazy. You look where Dustin Poirier went after defeating Dan Hooker, on to beat Conor twice and then fight for a title. You look at Michael Chandler, he defeated Dan Hooker and then went to fight for a title. So Dan Hooker's always been that guy who's like, okay, if you beat Dan Hooker, you can fight for a title. Now Arnold Allen's defeated him. He might be 1 or 2 fights away from a potential title shot. Featherweight division is this nasty stack, so that's why I don't know where Arnold Allen is right now. I would love to see Arnold Allen against a Calvin Kattar, who I believe he called out after this fight. Would love to see that fight. I think that'd be a fun fight. Josh Emmett would be another fun fight. You guys will have to comment down below and let me know, who do you want to see Arnold Allen fight next? Because there's a lot of great options. I think somebody in the live chat said book him against Bryce Mitchell. I would love that fight as well. Now let's move down the card because I got a lot of fights to talk about. I don't want to make this video 45 minutes. Paddy Pimblett versus Rodrigo Vargas. I almost got this fight 100% accurate with my prediction. I picked Paddy Pimblett by 2nd round rear naked choke. I just thought he was a far superior grappler to Rodrigo Vargas, and I thought he would get him down and submit him. I think I said in my prediction video, I think he would hurt him with a head kick, and then there would be a scramble. He would end up on top of him on the ground. But this fight was not without issue for Paddy Pimblett. Rodrigo Vargas came to fight in this fight. And I know a lot of people are criticizing Paddy Pimblett. Oh, he's only fighting trash cans and tomato cans and blah, blah, blah. And I am usually the same person kind of singing that narrative. But with Paddy Pimblett, I give him a pass. And not because, he's Paddy Pimblett and I like him because he's got a funny personality. He's only 2 fights into the UFC. Now, when I start to complain is when we get 4, 5, 6, 7 fights into the UFC and you're still not fighting really good competition and you're talking quite a bit. Paddy Pimblett's still very young, still has a lot of time to improve. So I'm not really highly critical of the UFC selective matchmaking, but we all knew coming into this fight, Rodrigo Vargas, the UFC picked him. They see dollar signs when they look at Paddy Pimblett. They picked Vargas because they know he would be a decent fight, but they knew most likely Paddy Pimblett would win this fight. And Vargas came out and he gave it everything he had, and it wasn't looking that good for Paddy Pimblett early. He got clipped with a right hand, dropped. I don't think he was rocked heavily. Vargas was controlling him on the ground, not landing a lot of shots. Eventually, Paddy Pimblett works his way back to his feet. I think he used his back on the cage, was able to kind of wall walk a little bit, get back to his feet. Vargas hung out in that clinch, and also, I think Vargas was massively undersized compared to Paddy Pimblett. Pimblett hip tosses him, gets him to the ground. Immediately, Vargas gets out of position, ends up giving up his back, and Paddy Pimblett gets the rear naked choke. I still can't answer the question. I know there's somebody who's probably going to comment on this video. Is Paddy Pimblett the real deal? We don't know yet. He's not fighting elite level competition. And while he looks decent in these fights, there's still a lot of holes in his game. But he has a couple years, maybe 2-3 years, before we can really talk about, okay, is Paddy going to be a bust? Is Paddy the real deal? Because he's probably not fighting elite competition for at least another 2 years, in my opinion. The UFC is going to protect him. Did you see that smile on Dana White's face after Paddy Pimblett got the win? Did you see that smile? They know basically what they're doing is they're going to give him fights that are very winnable. And they're hoping while he fights these guys that are very winnable, that as he's training and doing these training camps, he can get better, where eventually when it becomes undeniable, 5, 6 fights, 7 fights in, for O'Malley, 9 fights in or something like that, where they have to then match him up with that top 15. Hopefully he has acquired enough skills and improved enough at that point to then be able to compete with some of these elite of the elite. But in the meantime, they're going to keep throwing him on main cards, attract eyeballs from the UK, and they're looking to build Paddy Pimblett into a massive star. He faced a little bit of adversity in this fight. Still not a lot to go off. Paddy Pimblett has decent grappling. He's got good submission ability. I don't know where he goes from here. He seemed like he's not interested in that Topuria fight. The UFC is definitely not going to be interested in the Topuria fight. I know a lot of fans would like to see it, but I just don't think that's going to happen. Topuria, I think, is going to be too much of a step up, even though I think Pimblett has a chance just because Topuria is massively undersized at lightweight, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Moving down the main card, we had Gunnar Nelson versus Takashi Sato. I thought Gunnar Nelson was going to win this fight by submission. Gunnar Nelson, I thought he retired. He's been gone for like 3 years. Basically, he came out, took Sato down all 3 rounds, controlled him on the ground, had the back mount for the majority of the rounds, landed some good ground and pound strikes from the back, but just could never lock in that rear naked choke, which he perpetually looked to get. Decent win for Nelson, but this was a fight he was supposed to win. The UFC gave him Sato to come out and make a statement performance after being off for so long. What I don't want to see is people acting like Gunnar Nelson is some welterweight contender at this point in time. They did it back in the day just because Nelson trains with Conor McGregor. He has a similar stance to Conor McGregor. And we see this all the time. People who train with Khabib, they act like all of a sudden they're going to be the next champion just because they train with a certain guy. I do not want to see anybody saying Gunnar Nelson is a welterweight contender. He is far from that at this point in time. He took Sato down and controlled him and won the fight. That's pretty much all there is to say. I mean, it was dominant grappling. I'm not particularly super impressed. He really didn't throw too much with the hands. Sato didn't do anything on the feet because he was too worried about the takedown, and justifiably so, because, he was going to get double-legged and takedown or clinched and, tripped down, and then eventually he could not get up. I don't think he got up one time in this fight. Moving down the card, Molly McCann versus Luana Carolina. This fight I didn't find particularly super interesting, but the finish was insane. Molly McCann, spinning back elbow, brutal KO over Luana Carolina. The fight up until that point, the first round, people were saying it was a 10-8 round. Molly hurt her with some strikes on the feet and then swarmed her multiple times in the first round. But a lot of those swarms, nothing was landing. So I don't think that was a 10-8 round. It was a 10-9 round. Second round, Molly McCann got a couple takedowns, didn't do anything with it, didn't land any strikes. I thought Carolina landed more strikes in the second round, had more effective striking. I gave the second round to Luana Carolina. Third round, I was wondering what was going to happen because Molly McCann was breathing with her mouth open. She looked a little bit tired. She expelled a lot of energy in that first round looking for the finish. But she spins and lands a brutal elbow and just sleeps her. I mean, Carolina just went out cold. One of the filthiest KOs I've ever seen. And I know a lot of people are saying this was KO of the year, already. I think context matters. And I don't think, as crazy as this KO was, look who it's over, okay? And another thing I did not like, and maybe I'm just a hater, I don't know. She got some replica belt and was like trotting around like she's UFC champion. You just beat a girl that's not even ranked in the top 15. I doubt even on world MMA rankings, I doubt she's even ranked in the top 30. Decent win, a decent move up the ladder, but I still am not very high on her skill sets. And I think I'm overly critical sometimes of the women's bantamweight, flyweight, and sometimes even strawweight division, but not the strawweight division as much, because I compare them to the champion. And when I see Molly McCann and I imagine her fighting Valentina Shevchenko, she would get brutalized in that fight. But I think that's a long ways away. She gets the brutal KO here. I think it's very memorable. People will remember Molly McCann. And in the third round, too, it was just filthy. It was brutal. I hope Carolina's okay. But let's move down the card. Jai Herbert versus Ilia Topuria. This was a fight that I was pumped for. And I had no idea. I know Topuria, this was kind of a short notice fight. Topuria had a fight canceled a couple months ago, or a month and a half ago or so. And he kind of took this fight on short notice. And I don't think he wanted to cut weight twice to get to 145, because Topuria typically fights at 145. So this was at 155 against a 155er. And the second the referee said, okay, fight, there was a massive size discrepancy. It was jarring when I saw them come together. Jai Herbert was massive, and he had an 8-inch reach advantage, which he used in that first round. He brutalized Topuria. Topuria almost got finished in this first round, but somehow, second round starts off, Topuria just plodding forward, lands a nasty left hook to the body, followed by a perfect right hand to the chin, sleeps Jai Herbert, brutal KO. The second most brutal KO on the card, because Molly McCann has the first. But it just showed to me multiple things. First off, Topuria has game-changing power. He's knocking out 155ers. I know Jai Herbert isn't known for the best chin in the world, but the fact that the size discrepancy was so massive, and Topuria was able to come out after facing heavy adversity in that first round, almost getting finished himself, able to recompose himself, and then he was still confident enough to move forward and look for these heavy shots, because he was swinging pretty wildly, and that's what got him clipped up in that first round. He was swinging very wildly. And even after he got rocked, he was still like, you know what? I'm looking to take this guy's head off. And if you're not super familiar with Ilia Topuria, he's majority known for his grappling. So I think there's a very high ceiling for this guy, but it has to be at 145. It's not going to be at 155. He called out Paddy Pimblett afterwards. He said, I want that blonde bitch. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Paddy Pimblett wants it. I think Topuria, as far as skills go, is the far superior striker. But even if the skills gap is close enough, I think Paddy Pimblett is going to be much bigger than Topuria. So I think it's still a potential winnable fight for Pimblett, but I would favor Topuria. But I don't think the UFC is going to book it. I don't think Pimblett wants it. It's too risky for the UFC. When they look at Paddy Pimblett and they see their new cash cow, they're not going to want to match him up with Ilia Topuria. But Ilia Topuria, I definitely want to see him fight next at 145, unless he does fight that Pimblett fight. All right, let's move on to the prelims. Quickly touch on a couple prelims. Mike Grundy versus Makwan Amirkhani. I feel bad for Grundy. His family was there. He shoots in on a takedown immediately and immediately gets Darce choked by Makwan Amirkhani. Choked out cold. The fight only lasted 57 seconds. I don't know what more to say about it. I mean, that's what happened. There was very little strikes thrown in this fight. I feel terrible for Mike Grundy. Makwan Amirkhani was kind of fighting for his job here on a losing streak. Great choke. I mean, he cinched it up and he did not let go. Great win for him. Shamil Abdurakhimov, I think it's time for retirement. Gets brutally KO'd at the end of the first round. A lot of shots to the back of the head on this finish. Clipped him, took him down, finished him with ground and pound. There were some that were very close. I haven't gone back and rewatched it, but at one point it looked like the referee might have even blocked one of the shots to the back of the head. So, I just feel like, and the one thing I want to talk about is this card as a whole, and as I watch these fight night cards, and I want to let you guys let me know what you think in the comments. At this point, they might as well legalize fence grabbing and legalize shots to the back of the head, because there's nothing ever done about them. I'm sick and tired of every card, week after week, fence grabs, egregious fence grabs, and shots to the back of the head. It's getting super annoying. But let's move down the card. Nikita, and this was a stacked card. How often do I talk about all these prelims? That's how stacked this card was. The UFC really wanted to put on a show for UFC London. Nikita Krylov versus Paul Craig. Paul Craig gets the first round triangle choke. My question is, does Nikita Krylov or his corner or his coaches watch any footage from Paul Craig? Everyone knows this guy is a submission expert. And Nikita Krylov arguably KO'd him with ground and pound in the first round, landed nasty shots. Paul Craig's hands were down by his side. He looked out cold. Referee did not stop it. He started moving. I think he kind of woke back up. It was a flash KO. Eventually, Paul Craig, with lightning precision, locks up a triangle choke. Nikita Krylov should have either got in, maybe got inside control, but why are you hanging out in Paul Craig's guard? We've seen it time and time again. He submitted Magomed Ankalaev. He submitted Jamal Hill. Don't do it. He did it, and he paid the price. Great win for Paul Craig, who said he's kind of on the verge of retirement, so it's now or never. He has that big win over Jamal Hill, who's kind of surging right now. I think there are some big fights in the future coming up for Paul Craig. Jack Shore versus Timur Valiev. This was a fight that I was really looking forward to. This was a back-and-forth fight. But I think it really came down to Jack Shore won by decision. I just think it came down to Jack Shore was the more technical striker. He hurt Timur Valiev multiple times in this fight. He just looked so good, so composed. The first 2 rounds were pretty close. You know, I think the first 2 rounds could have gone either way. I was worried a little bit about the judging because there was a couple takedowns by Valiev, but he didn't really do much with it, so he really couldn't score too much for it. But the third round was clearly Jack Shore's. I think even one judge gave it to him 10-8. Hurt Valiev multiple times. Valiev shows that he can recover and face adversity, but I think this just shows how great the bantamweight division is. I mean, you have 2 of these guys who aren't even ranked in the top 15, and I just think they are such good fighters, such great fighters even. Was a great fight on the prelims. Could not miss this fight. This was one of my favorite fights on the card, if not my favorite fight on the card going into it. Moving down through the fights, Cory McKenna versus Elise Reed. I didn't watch too much of. I was a little bit busy at that point in time. Elise Reed gets the decision, but from everyone that I've talked to, basically it was a robbery. I can't comment too much on it because I only watched it sparingly, but I'll have to go back and rewatch that if you guys want me to. But I wanted to talk about the debut of Muhammad Mokaev. What a win over Cody Durden. Gets the first round submission via choke. Comes out, looks really good, looks really patient, lands a perfectly placed flying knee. Cody Durden starts to look to clinch up and look for a takedown, and immediately Mokaev locks in the choke. What a debut. I mean, to finish him 58 seconds into the fight is super impressive. And I know Cody Durden isn't, you know, some amazing flyweight or anything, but he's a durable guy. He's a decent guy. This was a decent debut fight for Muhammad, and he came out and looked so impressive. I can't wait to see where he goes from here. You know, he just looked great all overall. But again, you know, it's just his debut. It's against Cody Durden. I think we have to temper expectations a little bit. I think a lot of the times we get caught up too much. You know, this guy looked amazing, and it's only one fight into the UFC. But he didn't really get touched in the fight. He looked super patient. He found his moments. He landed that flying knee, rocked Cody Durden, and he had the killer instinct. As soon as he shot it on that takedown, rather than trying to defend it, he said, you know what? I'm going to go for this submission. I think it was a guillotine or a Darce choke. I can't remember. It was so early in the fight, and there were so many crazy fights tonight. After he did lock in the choke, Cody Durden fought with all his effort to get out of this fight. Get out of this submission, not fight. And he slammed. There was like a weird slam, and Mokaev just held onto this choke for dear life and was able to get it and tap him. Great win for Mokaev. Can't wait to see where he goes from here. And a great addition to the UFC flyweight division. We need more guys within the flyweight division. It's kind of been growing over the last few years. I can't believe Dana White ever wanted to close that division. But I think that pretty much does it. That wraps up the whole card. What a great card for UFC London. Let me know what you guys think of all these fights in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and also make sure you subscribe to the channel. I do these post fights every single week, as well as a bunch of prediction videos. So thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like it, and I will see you in the next video.